Utah Congressman Ben McAdams from Utah's 4th District, thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Good to be with you, Bob. Thank you.
Boy, I tell you, you are looking a lot better now that you're out of the hospital. You were there for about a week with COVID-19. Walk us through the process of your feeling, what you felt physically when you came down with COVID-19 and you finally realized you needed to get tested and wound up in the hospital.
Well, it all started on Saturday evening, March 14th, and I was started just not feeling well, and I wasn't sure. I hadn't slept much in the previous days, so just decided to go to bed early. And then I woke up Sunday morning, and I was still sick. It was actually pretty mild, but I called the doctor. You know, we're in the hype of the coronavirus, so I called the doctor, and he said I should continue to isolate myself. I'd been isolated from Saturday morning onward, and so he said, probably isolate yourself, watch your symptoms. He says it's probably not the coronavirus, but just be careful and watch it closely. So that was Sunday. Monday I actually felt better. Thought I had turned a corner and it must have just been a mild cold or something. But then Monday night, as I went to bed, I just started feeling a lot worse. It felt like it had moved into my lungs. It felt like I had a belt around my chest. My chest was just really tight, and it was hard to breathe. So I was only getting half breaths at a time. And so Tuesday morning, I called the doctor, and the doctor said that I should go and get tested for the coronavirus. And I did, and it came back positive. So the first time I had asked about a test, they said my symptoms didn't match it. But the second time I had a fever of about 103 and difficulty breathing. So they tested me, and it did come back positive. And they said, stay at home, continue to quarantine as you've been doing, and just be careful and watch the symptoms and let us know if it changes at all. So then it was on Friday evening that I just felt it again enter a third phase, and I just got worse, and I couldn't get up and walk across the room without feeling out of breath, and I'd have to sit down and catch my breath, and was panting and just really was having a hard time breathing, and also had a fever of again between 102 and 103. And so I called my doctor again and described the symptoms, and he told me I should go to the hospital to get checked out, and I did, and they monitored they checked the oxygen levels in my blood. My oxygen was low, and so they immediately put me on supplemental oxygen and monitored my symptoms. They said they wanted to keep me for a night, and one night turned into 8 nights as I stayed at the hospital and just had a pretty scary run, just feeling difficulty breathing. Couldn't, if I ever took off the oxygen, we'd see my oxygen levels go down, high fevers, and just not feeling very good. And so they were worried that it could take a turn for the worse again. And so we monitored it. And it was finally, Thursday night, I had another fever. But then Friday morning, I woke up feeling so much better. And they wanted to see just if I was going to crash again on Friday, and I didn't. And so they finally sent me home on Saturday. I felt a lot better. They told me to continue to quarantine at home and away from my family until I had been 72 hours without a fever. And so it was Monday morning that I finally emerged from my cocoon. And it's just been, I'm still probably not 100%, but feeling better every day right now.
What exactly did the doctors and nurses do for you at the hospital? Did they give you drugs? I know they gave you oxygen, but what else did they do to help you through this?
They did give me oxygen, watch my symptoms very closely. I think the fear was that it would take another turn for the worse, and that I might need a ventilator, which fortunately I never did. But they gave me the hydroxychloroquine, one of the drugs that's been talked about. I received that on a daily basis, and they were trying different things to see what might help my lungs get better. They did three different times. They did a lung X-ray to see. They were watching to see if I would develop viral pneumonia. They did see some areas of my lungs that looked a little bit troubling, and so they were watching those to see if they got any worse, and they didn't. So it was just really watching my symptoms, making sure that I was able to continue breathing and have the oxygen in my blood that I needed, and that it didn't take a turn for the worse.
It sounds like there was an awful lot of watching. And tell us what the hydroxychloroquine did for you. Did it relieve your symptoms at all?
I don't really know. I took the drug on a daily basis. I don't know. I didn't get worse. I don't know if to say it was a result of the drug or that maybe I was just the trajectory that my sickness was on anyway. So I think it's that for me says, certainly didn't hurt, but it's why when we hear people talk about that drug, the need for scientific studies to really see over a cross section of a broader group of people what impact that drug is having. So, I don't know to say whether it helped me or not. I was pretty sick for about 9 days as I was in the hospital. And then as my body developed the antibodies, I got much better. And I guess it's hard to say whether the drug stopped me from getting worse or shortened the duration. I just don't know. I'll leave that up to the doctors to decide.
Now, you're in pretty good health otherwise. I mean, you're young, you're vibrant, you're active. Do you think that played in your favor in this case?
I think it certainly couldn't help. I'm 45 years old. I don't have any underlying health conditions. I take multivitamins and other supplements every day, and I exercise on a daily basis. And so I'm sure that helped that I was in good shape to begin with, but this really hit me hard. In the week that I was in the hospital, lost almost 13 pounds, and it just hit really hard. I had no appetite, and it took a real toll on my body. Even now that I'm virus free, I still feel weak and drained and coming back. So fortunately, I was in good health. I can only imagine, and this is why they say people who are older or have underlying health conditions, why it is so dangerous for them. That me in good health, it hit really hard, and I had some scary days. I can only imagine if I didn't have good health to begin with.
Did you at any point feel like, hey, this could take my life? Did you ever get to that point in the hospital?
I think the thing that I was worried about is needing a ventilator. So I never got to the point that I would need a ventilator. But I think there was, there's some fear. I'm laying there in the hospital. I'm struggling to breathe. I'm just taking short and shallow breaths, and it was pretty scary. A few different days. There was, I'd usually talk to my wife and our kids several times each day, and we'd do FaceTime and that to see each other. But there were a couple of days there where I just didn't have the energy to hold up a phone, to carry on a conversation. I couldn't, focus on breathing and talking at the same time. So I just would have short conversations with my family and then go. And so, there were a few scary days there. I know that there are people who have who this hit even harder, and I think I was lucky that it didn't get worse. But there were a few pretty scary days.
Is it safe to say that this is the sickest you have ever been?
By every metric, this is the sickest I have ever been, and the longest. I was down for 16 days with this, and it just felt awful. Felt like I'd been hit by a truck.
We have seen video from Italy and from Spain, and the medical professionals there just working at a breakneck pace, trying to save people's lives. What was the pace like in the hospital where you were when it came to your care and any other COVID-19 patients that you might have been aware of? What was that pace like?
I think we're fortunate that in Utah, I think our governor took drastic measures fairly early with closing the schools and with churches being canceled and different things. I think that I guess time will tell, but it feels like we were ahead of the curve a little bit there. So the hospital actually had the capacity to help me. And, I'm aware that there were other people who were suffering from this COVID-19 in the hospital, but they're pretty strict about the privacy. So didn't talk about other people in the hospital. But I would ask my caregivers how they were and if they had the equipment, the protective equipment they needed, and how busy the hospital was. And one of the things they kept telling me was that the hospital had and hospitals statewide had stopped performing any type of elective surgery, and your hip transplants or other hip replacements or other things that could be delayed. And so they had delayed those things. So they said it was kind of the calm before the storm type feeling, that there were no visitors in the hospital, so it was quiet, and they had stopped all of these elective surgeries, so there was capacity, and they were able to focus on helping those with the coronavirus who were very sick get the help that we needed. And so I think I was lucky to be in the hospital in a time where there was adequate staffing and adequate equipment to make sure I had everything I needed. And, that's why we talk about flattening this curve. We never want to get to the point that those people on those men and women on the front lines, those healthcare professionals, aren't able to do their job because they don't have the time or the space or the equipment that they need to protect themselves and to serve those people who are suffering from this illness. And so, that's why our governor has given the directives that he has that are so important for us to follow, because we have to flatten that curve and stay within the capacity of our healthcare system to serve those people who are going to need the help.
You mentioned your wife and your children and how there were some days in the hospital when you didn't even have enough energy to hold up the phone to FaceTime with them. How has this affected them?
I think like a lot of kids, they're stir crazy. They're quarantined, which is, I think, more than most people have, because they were exposed to me. We have been inside the house, and they have to stay in the house until Friday, and to not risk exposing anyone else. So a little bit stir crazy. They haven't been able to go out for a walk, or they can go out in the backyard. We have a trampoline, so they're able to be out in the backyard a little bit and get some exercise, but everybody's pretty stir crazy. I know they were pretty worried about me when I was in the hospital and gone for so long, that was something that weighed on their minds. And they were, very happy to have me home, and now they're anxious to just let the clock tick away until they can be released from their quarantine and get out and get some fresh air and go on a walk or a run and just stretch their legs a little bit.
And I would imagine they're also anxious to see if and when you're ever going to shave again.
Yeah, they do talk about this beard here and wonder if it's going to go. They like it for now, but I'm probably gonna. I was just so weak in the hospital, I couldn't get up to shave or do anything, and so I just I didn't shave then, and now decided to keep it for a little bit, see how it goes. I don't think I'm the type that will keep it forever, but I'm gonna keep it for a couple more weeks.
What's your wife say? Does she like it?
She doesn't like it.
She doesn't like it.
No, she doesn't like it. She doesn't like it. She's ready for it to go.
Okay. This past weekend, sadly, we lost a business titan here in Utah. Bob Garf passed away because of COVID-19. What message does that send if someone of that magnitude and that profile can actually succumb to COVID-19? What does that say to all the rest of us?
This is a sickness that doesn't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're old or young, if you're successful or struggling. And, I had the pleasure of knowing Bob Garf a little bit, and what a titan in our community he was, and how committed he was to public service, and to how much he loved his state and how much he gave back. And his loss will really touch so many of us in so many ways. And he will be missed. But I think that this hopefully will also serve as a wake-up call to all of us, that the governor's not joking, that when he tells us to stay home and stay safe, he means it. And he's being advised by public health professionals who know the science and the data behind this, and how important it is for us to follow that directive. And I hope, that's why I've been willing to speak up, even though I'm tired and I'm not quite 100% right now. I've wanted to speak up to also share that message that this is serious. And I know it's causing hardship on a lot of families, and it's impacting our livelihoods, our ability to put food on the table and care for our families. But this is serious, and it's important to follow the directives that are given to us to stay home and stay safe.
I realize that you are just now emerging from this experience, and in fact, it's not really over yet. but how has it changed you?
You know, I think for me, it's really, you know, I think I probably, as we were all watching this virus develop and hearing the warnings, and you know, fortunately, I heeded the warnings that were given by president, by the governor, to practice social distancing, to wash our hands, to do all of those things. But I also felt, you know, that I had seen the statistics. The statistics say that this is really of concern for older people or people with underlying health conditions. But, you know, I just saw it really hit me hard, and says that this is a virus that is no respecter of persons, and is something we should take very seriously. And whether it's, you know, it's going to hit you hard or like it hit me, but also, you know, my mind, as I was diagnosed and suffering from this, turned to the people who I might have exposed. And I was so happy that I had isolated and quarantined and followed the directives, so that the number of people who I might have exposed was limited and narrow. But, you know, I think that's why it's also so important to follow this directive, because you don't know how somebody else's immune system is going to deal with this. And I think it's so important to be thoughtful of other people who, even if you get a mild case, the next person may not. And it's only by coming together and following the directives that are given to us by our public health officials that we're going to slow the spread of this.
When you finally made that realization that you were going to live through this and that you were going to get better and come back to full speed at some point, what happened inside your heart?
You know, excuse me. They tell me that this cough will maybe be with me for a month or so. So even though I'm not symptomatic, the virus is gone. There's still, you know, some damage done that'll take some time for my body to overcome. But part of how this was there were points in almost every day where I rallied and I felt better, and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm gonna get better. And then I would just crash again. My fever would skyrocket, my breathing would become difficult, and my oxygen levels would nosedive. And it was just so frustrating that it just felt like I could never turn a corner on this. And then finally, it was on Friday that I started feeling better, and I didn't crash, and was feeling, you could see the light at the end of the tunnel, that I'd be released from the hospital. I'd be able to see my family. And it really, really put into perspective, I think, what's important in life, those who we love and cherish, and who make our lives what they are. And for me, it's been a time to reflect on that, to hold close my wife and my kids, and to really value them. And, you know, it's also a time, it's kind of scary that what this means for our country economically. And, you know, I think happy that I can it's kind of forced us, I think, to focus on what's important. And that's our loved ones and our family, and what they mean to us. And I think there are difficult times ahead for our country, for our state, as we, you know, as more and more people are impacted by this virus, as the impacts of this pandemic on our economy, on our jobs, on the livelihoods of our family, I think we're going to feel it. And some people are going to feel it maybe more than others. But we need to come together, and we can get through this.
Congressman Ben McAdams, we are so glad that you are back up, you're out of the hospital, and that COVID-19 is in your rearview mirror. Thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Thank you, Bob.